My leg was throbbing, and my mouth felt as dry as cracked earth under the scorching sun. I asked my daughter-in-law for a glass of water, and I received a scream that still rings in my ears. Get up and get it yourself, you useless old woman. My son looked down. I gritted my teeth, stood up with the pain stabbing my knee, and walked. I did not answer. That night at 2 in the morning, I dialed a number I had saved for years. Not to cry, but to get my house back, and with it my life. The heat that particular day had been absolutely merciless. You know, the kind I'm talking about, the type that makes the very walls seem to pulse and breathe. This little beach town where I've lived for decades knows how to be generous with the ocean breeze most days, but it also knows cruelty when the humidity gets trapped inside these old houses. I was settled in my favorite reading chair, the one with the cream-colored fabric that I bought years back before Daniel got married. My left leg was propped up on a cushion, elevated just like the doctor ordered. Arthritis doesn't forgive you when the weather's about to turn, and that afternoon my knee was screaming that a storm was heading our way. My throat felt parched, completely dry. I recognized that warning signal my body was sending. After 7 decades of living, you learn to read the signs. Hydrate, Ruth. Hydrate right now, before it gets worse. The water pitcher was sitting on the coffee table, right there in front of Melissa. My daughter-in-law had her feet propped up on that same table, the one I'd paid for in monthly installments 15 years ago, scrolling through her phone, giggling at something on the screen. Daniel sat beside her on the sofa, slumped down, staring at the television without actually watching anything. His eyes were glazed over, somewhere else entirely. I called out, my voice coming out slightly raspy. I was careful with my tone, you understand? I've always believed that choosing the right words can prevent fires before they start. Melissa, sweetheart, I said as gently as I could. Could you pass me the water pitcher, please? It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a complaint. It was a simple favor, the kind you might ask of a stranger on the street corner. The silence that followed lasted maybe 2 seconds, but Lord, it stretched out like a rubber band pulled to its breaking point. Melissa sighed this long, drawn-out sigh, loaded with annoyance, like I was some kind of mosquito buzzing near her ear. She lowered her phone with theatrical slowness, moving like she was underwater, and looked directly at me. In her eyes, I saw no warmth, no affection, no basic human respect. What I saw was pure, undiluted contempt. Get up and get it yourself, you useless old woman. She screamed. The words came out like venom. This isn't a hotel, for crying out loud. The sound of that scream bounced around my living room like a rubber ball. I felt the impact as surely as if she'd reached across and slapped me hard across the face. The air left my lungs for a second. I couldn't breathe. I looked toward my son, Daniel, the little boy I'd walked to school every single morning, holding his hand through rain and sunshine. The man I'd raised completely alone after his father passed away when he was only 7 years old. The child I'd worked myself to the bone for. He didn't look at me. He lowered his head like a scolded dog. He stayed completely silent. That silence, that cowardly, shameful silence, was worse than Melissa's scream. It cut deeper than any words could. I clenched my teeth together so hard my jaw ached. I pressed my hands down on the arms of my chair and pushed my body upward. My knee made this awful crunching sound that echoed in my ears. The pain shot up my leg in hot waves, but you know what? It didn't stop me. Not for 1 second. I walked slowly, carefully, to that coffee table. Melissa had already returned her attention to her phone, a tiny smile of victory playing at the corner of her lips. Like she'd won some kind of battle. I picked up that water pitcher with a hand that trembled. Whether from pain or rage, I honestly couldn't tell you. I poured the water without spilling a single drop, even though my hands were shaking. I drank it standing right there, feeling the cold liquid slide down my parched throat, quenching one kind of thirst while lighting a completely different kind of fire in my belly. "Good night," I said in a voice I barely recognized. It was firm, metallic, cold as ice. I turned my back on both of them and walked down the hallway to my bedroom. I didn't look at anyone. I didn't wait for a response. When I reached my room, I went inside and closed the door behind me. Then I did something I'd never done before in this house. I turned the key in the lock. I had never locked my bedroom door. Not once in all the years I'd lived here. I always thought Daniel might need me during the night, that he might knock and need his mother for something. That night, sitting on the edge of my bed in the darkness, I understood something with perfect clarity. The person who had needed me was no longer there. That little boy was gone, and the man who'd replaced him was a stranger. I sat there on the edge of my bed. The room was cast in shadows, illuminated only by the yellowish glow of the streetlight outside my window. I stared at my solid wood wardrobe, the one I'd bought at an estate sale decades ago. Way up on the top shelf, hidden behind some heavy winter blankets we almost never used in this coastal heat, there was an old shoebox. I stood up, ignoring the sharp protest from my knee. I dragged over my little wooden step stool and climbed up carefully, gripping the shelf for balance. I reached back behind those blankets and pulled out that box, bringing it down like I was carrying something precious and fragile. And you know what? I was. It was my entire life, documented on paper. My name is Ruth Patterson. I'm 72 years old. I worked as a labor and delivery nurse for 40 solid years. I helped bring hundreds of babies into this world, held their mothers' hands through the pain, and I've held cold, dying hands during their final breaths in the hospital. I worked double shifts, triple shifts sometimes, entire nights without sleep, weekends, holidays, Christmas mornings. I missed family gatherings, birthday parties, my own youth slipping away like sand through my fingers. All of it, every single sacrifice, so I could give my son a better life. So it could buy this house, brick by brick, dollar by dollar. This house where they now called me useless. I opened that shoebox. The smell of old stored paper rose up like a memory you can almost touch. Inside were the property deeds, crisp and official, with my name printed clear as day. There was also a hardcover notebook where I'd started keeping track almost without realizing. I was doing it of every single expense I'd paid, since Melissa and Daniel had asked to stay just a few months after their wedding. Those months had turned into years. 3 long years. The guest had started believing she was the owner, and I had become a shadow in my own home. I'd started avoiding the living room when Melissa was watching her reality shows. I stopped cooking with garlic because she said it made her nauseous. I made myself smaller and smaller, shrinking down to fit into the corners of their lives, thinking somehow I was helping my son, thinking I was being a good mother. I watched Daniel become smaller too, walking on eggshells around her, tiptoeing through his own life, trying not to upset her. And I accepted it all because I was terrified of being alone, of being abandoned in my old age. But that night, sitting there with that shoebox in my lap, the fear changed shape. It transformed into something else entirely. I looked at my bedside clock. The glowing numbers read 2 a.m. Outside my window, the house slept. But inside me, something woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt since my days in the emergency room, when you had to make life or death decisions without your hands shaking. I picked up my cell phone, the one with the big letters that Melissa constantly mocked as outdated and embarrassing. I scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I'd saved years ago. Just in case, Mr. Harrison, attorney at law, I dialed. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. "Hello?" answered a sleepy, confused voice. Mr. Harrison, I said, I apologize for calling at this hour. This is Ruth Patterson. There was a brief silence, then I heard sheets rustling. His tone changed completely. Mrs. Patterson? Are you all right? Is everything okay with your health? My health is fine, considering my age, I answered. The problem is something else entirely. I need your help to get my house back. On the other side of the line, I heard the distinct sound of someone sitting up in bed, the click of a lamp being turned on. Your house? He asked, suddenly alert. From whom? From the people living in it who've forgotten it isn't theirs. I felt the weight of those words as they left my mouth, but I didn't hesitate. Not for 1 second. When do you want to start? He asked. Tomorrow, I began, then stopped myself. No, I want to start right now, tonight. I pressed those property deeds against my chest, holding them like a shield. Useless old woman, she had called me. I smiled then a small cold smile in the darkness of my room. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They didn't know that when you've spent your entire life working in delivery rooms and emergency wards, you learn to distinguish what can be healed and what must be cut away to save the patient. I hung up the phone. I lay back on my bed without any hope of sleeping. I listened to the distant sound of the ocean waves hitting the shore, steady and eternal. And I knew with absolute certainty that when the sun came up, it would bring something new, something definitive, something that would change everything. Dawn arrived without asking anyone's permission. At 5:30 in the morning, my body did what it had learned to do during 4 decades of hospital shifts. It woke up on its own, no alarm needed. The pain was still there in my knee, settled in like an old familiar companion. But there was something different in the air that morning. It wasn't relief I felt. It was pure, crystallized determination. I walked barefoot to the kitchen, moving quietly, trying not to make any noise. The house existed in that deceptive silence that only happens when people are sleeping, completely convinced that when they wake up, everything will be exactly the same as it was before. The living room looked frozen in time, like a museum exhibit of the night before. The empty water glass still sat on the table. The marks from Melissa's feet were still visible on the furniture I'd paid for in installments. The decorative throw pillows were scattered everywhere. It wasn't just disorder I was looking at. It was conquered territory, a colonized space. I opened the window to let in the salty ocean air. The breeze entered timidly, almost apologetically, like it was asking permission to come inside. I thought about how ironic that was outside was freedom, while inside was this suffocating weight pressing down on everything. I made myself a pot of strong black coffee, the way I actually like it, not the weak nonsense Melissa preferred. While the coffee maker burbled and hissed, I opened the refrigerator. Expensive imported cheeses I never touched. Craft beers I didn't drink. Takeout containers from restaurants I couldn't afford. I looked for my prescription medications and found them shoved away in the back corner, practically hidden behind all their food. I closed the refrigerator door carefully, quietly. On the counter next to the microwave sat a stack of unopened bills. Electric, internet, water. I picked them up and arranged them in a neat row. The electric bill had a red banner across the top announcing an unusually high rate. Of course, it was high. The air conditioning ran day and night, even when nobody was home. I sat down at the kitchen table and started adding everything up. Not with rage, not with anger, with method, with the same clinical precision I'd used in the hospital. When there's a hemorrhage, you quantify the blood loss. You measure. You document. Each number I wrote down represented one less drop of naivety in my system. I had been financially supporting 2 perfectly healthy adults who treated me like I was nothing more than a nuisance. An inconvenience. That wasn't family. That was a drain. A parasite. While I drank my coffee, memories arrived uninvited. Me younger, in my crisp white nurse's uniform, leaving for the hospital before dawn. Me carrying a sleeping Daniel in my arms when there was nobody else to watch him. Me saving dollar by dollar, penny by penny, to buy this house near the ocean, dreaming of a peaceful retirement. A quiet old age. I never imagined that peace would shatter from the inside. Melissa had entered my life 3 years ago with a perfect smile plastered on her face. At first it was all Mrs. Patterson this and Mrs. Patterson that. Sweet as honey. When she married Daniel and I learned his salary wasn't enough for them to get their own place, I opened my door. Opened my home. Just a few months, they promised. Just until we get on our feet. I'd nodded. A mother doesn't see traps when she's looking at promises. A mother sees hope. The months became years. The thank yous became demands. The can I became you have to. The complaints started slowly, the smell of my cooking, the volume of my television shows, the ugly furniture I'd chosen. I found myself avoiding them in my own home, measuring my steps, keeping quiet to avoid provoking storms. I made myself small, invisible. I thought it was sacrifice. I thought it was love. But it wasn't. It was slow erasure. Mid-morning, Melissa emerged from the bedroom dressed for the gym in expensive athletic wear I knew I'd paid for. She looked at me with suspicion, seeing me sitting at the table with all these papers spread out. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Accounting," I answered simply. "My accounts. My expenses. You. She gave me this sideways, condescending smile. "Don't stress yourself out, Mrs. Patterson. You know stress isn't good at your age." I didn't respond. Daniel appeared behind her, yawning and rubbing his eyes. "Mom, is everything okay?" he asked, concern creeping into his voice. I looked him straight in the eyes. I saw exhaustion there, yes, but I also saw comfort. The comfort of someone who's gotten used to letting other people carry all the difficult decisions. "Everything is in order," I said evenly. For now. When they left the house, I stood up and walked to the Wi-Fi modem. I looked at it like it was some kind of artificial life support system. I called the cable company. I canceled the premium channels. All of them. I changed the Wi-Fi password to something new, something I repeated under my breath like a mantra. Work brings dignity. I felt this strange, unexpected peace wash over me. Then I picked up my cell phone and opened the banking app. I navigated to the additional credit card I'd set up in Daniel's name years ago. The one they'd been using like it was their own money. Cancel, confirm, done. There was no drama. No noise, no big scene. Just a single click and it was over. At noon, they came back home. Linda slammed her keys down on the hall table, the noise echoing through the house. "There's no internet," she announced without any greeting. "Is there maintenance or something?" "That's what they said," I answered calmly, not looking up from my book. "And the card?" Daniel interjected, pulling out his wallet. "It didn't go through at the store. It was declined." "I canceled it," I said, meeting his gaze directly. "It's no longer necessary." Melissa let out an incredulous, disbelieving laugh. "Are you joking right now?" I closed my book slowly. "I'm not joking." The silence stretched out like taffy. Daniel opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He looked lost. Melissa took charge. "And what exactly are we supposed to do?" she demanded, her voice rising. "Starve?" I looked at her with perfect serenity. "This isn't a hotel," I said, using her own words back at her. "Everyone takes care of their own needs." It was like striking a match near gasoline. Melissa's face turned bright red. "That's cruelty," she shouted. "You can't do this to us." "I can," I answered. "And I will." Melissa stormed out, slamming the front door so hard the windows rattled. Daniel stood there for a few seconds, caught between us, uncertain. "Mom," he started. "Not today, son," I interrupted. "Not today." I closed my bedroom door and leaned my back against it. I felt the trembling in my hands, the adrenaline coursing through my body, but I didn't back down. I knew the next move wouldn't come from me. It would come from them. When you cut off the supply, the true face appears. The mask falls away. I sat on my bed and took several deep breaths. I thought about the lawyer and his warning to cut off the perks. I thought about the Wi-Fi router, the additional credit card, all those luxuries they'd started confusing with basic rights. I thought about my son and his silence and how much it was going to hurt him when he finally learned the truth. Outside my window, the day continued. The ocean continued its eternal rhythm. And I did too. Tomorrow, I told myself. Tomorrow the treatment begins. And it won't be gentle. At noon the next day, the memory of Mr. Harrison's voice kept echoing in my head like a church bell that wouldn't stop ringing. I'd gotten up before dawn again with that autopilot punctuality your body develops when you've spent half your life showing up for hospital shifts without fail. My leg hurt, sure, but the pain wasn't in charge anymore. Clarity was running the show now. I walked down the hallway in complete silence. The door to Daniel and Melissa's bedroom was shut tight. Behind that wood, they were sleeping peacefully, absolutely convinced the world would keep spinning in their favor. I went into the living room, gathered up my notebook and the shoebox full of documents, and placed them on the table like a surgeon laying out instruments before an operation. I opened the window wide. The fresh early morning air rushed in, cleaning out some of the stale smell from the night before. I sat down and dialed the lawyer's number again. I didn't want to leave anything to chance. "Good morning, Mrs. Patterson," he answered, already awake and alert. "I thought you might call back." "I didn't sleep," I admitted. "I need you to explain the process step by step. Walk me through exactly what's going to happen." There was a brief pause. Then his voice took on that professional tone I knew well, the tone of someone about to deliver unvarnished truth. "The house is in your name," he said. "That's the foundation. That's what matters most. The rest is strategy and execution. What's first?" "First, formal eviction notice. 30 days minimum. Second, we cut off anything that could be interpreted as tacit permission for them to remain in the property." "Tacit permission?" I asked. "Bills you pay on their behalf? Additional credit cards? Comforts and conveniences? All of that supports the legal interpretation that they have some kind of right to be there. We need to dismantle that interpretation brick by brick." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I understand. There's going to be a fight," he added, his voice gentle but firm. "Tears, accusations. They might try to claim you're mentally unwell, that you're not competent to make these decisions." "I'm more competent than I've been in years," I answered without the slightest hesitation. I heard his brief, complicit chuckle on the other end of the line. "Then let's begin today. I'll prepare all the documents. You do your part on that end." I hung up and stared at my notebook. I opened it to the first page, looking at all those careful notes, dates, amounts, itemized expenses. I hadn't started keeping track because I was planning some legal battle. I'd done it because disorder and chaos have always given me anxiety. I needed things organized, documented, clear. Now I understood that this compulsive habit had become a life raft. At 9 o'clock sharp, Melissa came out of the bedroom with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. It was tense, rehearsed, artificially calm. Daniel followed behind her, looking serious, his brow furrowed. "Mom," he started, "we need to talk. It's important." "Of course," I answered. "Sit down, please." Melissa took charge of the conversation without even looking at me directly. I spoke with my family, she said, her voice measured. They're very worried about you. About me? I asked gently. Yes, she continued smoothly. They're saying that lately you've been acting strangely, cutting off services, canceling credit cards. They think maybe you're not in a condition to make these kinds of decisions by yourself anymore. There it was. The card I'd been expecting, the one I'd seen played against so many older women, doubt sewn into every conversation, suspicion wrapped up in fake concern. Is that what they're saying? I asked. They're suggesting we should seek professional help, Daniel added, looking uncomfortable. Maybe someone to evaluate your mental state, just to be sure everything's okay. I sat silently for a few seconds, not because I was thinking about what to say, but deciding exactly how to say it. I opened my notebook deliberately and placed it on the table. Then I set the property deeds right next to it. Two simple objects, heavy with meaning. Melissa, I said calmly, do you remember when I bought this house? She didn't answer, just stared. 18 years ago, I continued, with my money I earned. Here are the deeds. My name. Do you see it clearly? She glanced at the documents sideways, not wanting to acknowledge them. That's irrelevant, she said dismissively. It's completely relevant, I answered. And now the notebook. I opened to a marked page. Here's the sofa you picked out, the date I paid for it, the amount. Here's the premium cable package. Here's the repair on Daniel's car. Here's the grocery bill from last week's food I never touched. Daniel leaned forward, his eyes scanning the pages. Mom, he murmured. All of this, I said, flipping through page after page. For 3 years. Every expense, every payment, all documented. The silence fell like a heavy blanket smothering the room. Melissa stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This is manipulation, she shouted. You're trying to scare us with numbers and papers. No, I said firmly. I'm showing you facts, documentation, truth. Melissa took a deep breath, visibly trying to control herself. She changed tactics. Her voice became sweet, almost pleading. Mrs. Patterson Ruth, she corrected herself when she saw my expression. Look, I understand you're sensitive right now. Age, hormones, stress. But you can't just kick us out into the street like unwanted trash. We're family. I looked at her with honesty. Not cruelty, but truth. Don't call me that anymore, I said. Don't pretend we're family when you've treated me like hired help. Daniel is your son, she insisted, her voice rising again. Are you really going to destroy your own family over money? I felt the blow land exactly where she'd aimed it, right in my heart. Even so, I didn't back down. I'm not destroying anything, I said. I'm correcting something that got twisted and wrong. Melissa threw her envelope against the wall. But we wanted you with us. We were going to take care of you. A lie, I said firmly. You didn't want to take care of me. You wanted my money. And when you had it, you would have put me in the cheapest nursing facility you could find. Daniel shook his head. You're paranoid. You're inventing things. I'm not inventing anything, I said. Then I took my phone from my pocket. I have proof. Proof of what? Melissa asked, her voice trembling. Of everything. Of every conversation where you discussed me as if I were already dead. Of every plan you made behind my back. Of every cruel word you said, thinking I couldn't hear you. The color drained from Daniel's face. You recorded us. I recorded you, I confirmed, because I needed to be certain I wasn't imagining things. I needed proof that you truly only saw me as a means to get what you wanted. Daniel took a step toward me, his fists clenched. Give me that phone now. No, I replied, backing away. These recordings are my insurance, just in case you decide to do something foolish. Like what? Melissa asked. Like try to sue me. Like try to take what's mine. Like claim I'm senile or unfit to make decisions. I've seen enough stories to know how this works. Daniel laughed humorlessly. You're insane. Completely insane. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I finally regained my sanity after years of letting you walk all over me. There was a moment of tense silence. The three of us stared at each other. The air was thick with rage, with pain, with truths that had finally surfaced. Then Melissa spoke in a cold voice. We will never forgive you for this. Never. I can live with that, I replied. Daniel pointed to the door. Let's go, Melissa. There's nothing for us here anymore. She followed him, but before leaving, she turned back to me. I hope that money makes you happy, Margaret, because it's going to cost you your only family. It already cost me my family a long time ago, I said. I just hadn't realized it until now. They left, slamming the door. The sound echoed in the empty home, and I stayed there, standing alone. But I didn't feel alone. I felt victorious. I felt free. For the first time in years, I had defended what was mine. I had said no, and I had survived. I sat on the floor again. My legs were shaking from adrenaline. My heart was still pounding, but there was something else, something warm in my chest. It was relief. It was peace. It was the feeling of having reclaimed my life. I took out my phone and looked at the saved recordings. They were my shield, my protection, just in case Daniel tried something legal. Just in case he tried to spin this story another way. But something told me he wouldn't, because he knew he'd lost. And losers rarely admit defeat publicly. I stayed there a while longer, silently saying goodbye to this place that had been my home for so many years. But I didn't feel sadness. I felt gratitude, because this home had given me shelter, and now it had given me freedom. I got up from the floor and walked to the window. From there, I could see the street. I saw Daniel and Melissa leaving the building. He was walking fast, his fists clenched. She was behind him, wiping her tears dramatically. They got in the car, but they didn't start it right away. I saw them arguing inside. Melissa was waving her hands wildly. Daniel hit the steering wheel hard, and then something unexpected happened. The car didn't move. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. They were still there. And suddenly I understood. They were coming back. They weren't finished. They were going to try one last time. And sure enough, the car door opened. Daniel got out. He looked up toward the window where I was, and he started walking back to the building. I stepped away from the window. I took a deep breath, and I waited. The footsteps on the stairs sounded heavy, tired. When the door opened, only Daniel came in. Melissa had stayed in the car. My son looked different now. The rage was gone from his face. There was something worse, desperation. Mother, he said in a hoarse voice, please, we need to talk calmly. He didn't look me in the eye. He just stood in the middle of the empty home, his shoulders slumped. Then let's talk, I said, crossing my arms. He took a deep breath. Okay, you're right. We were insistent, too pushy, but we genuinely need that money. It's not a whim. It's our only chance to have something of our own, to build a life. And I thought that you, as my mother, would want to help me with that. As your mother, I repeated. Daniel, I helped you my entire life. I gave you everything I could. I paid for your college. I supported you when you changed majors 4 times. I lent you money you never repaid. And now that I finally decide to do something for myself, for my future, I'm selfish. He shook his head. It's not that. It's just that this money is different. It's substantial. It's enough to change our lives. And you're already old. You've already lived your life. We're just starting. His words hit me like stones. You've already lived your life. As if at 65, I was no longer entitled to anything. As if I should just sit and wait for death while they enjoyed what I'd built. Daniel, I said in a firm voice, I'm 65 years old, not 85. Not 95. I could still live another 20 or 30 years. And I am not going to spend them depending on anyone. I am not going to be left with nothing just so you can have everything. But that money belongs to me, he yelled. It's my inheritance. No, I replied, raising my voice too. An inheritance is what I leave you when I die, not what you take while I'm alive. He ran his hands over his face. He was on the verge of collapse. Then at least give me half. $50,000. We could make a down payment with that. I'm not asking for all of it, just a portion, and we'll repay you. I swear, I laughed humorlessly. Repay me with what? You already owe me $12,000 from previous loans you never repaid. Daniel fell silent because he knew it was true. Over the years, he'd come to me for money dozens of times. For the car, for the wedding, for courses, for emergencies that were never really emergencies. And he always promised to repay it, but he never did. And I never insisted because he was my son, and a mother doesn't charge her son. Or so I thought, but now I saw the truth. It wasn't generosity, it was weakness. It was allowing myself to be used over and over. Daniel, I said calmer, I am not giving you the money. Not all of it and not part of it. That money is for me. For my peace of mind, to know that if I get sick, if I need help, if something happens, I have the means to take care of it. Because clearly I cannot count on you. That's not fair, he said, his voice breaking. I would be there if you needed me. I really would. Just like you've been there these past 7 years. I asked sarcastically, visiting me once monthly, calling only when you needed something, treating me like old furniture that was in your way. He opened his mouth to protest, but nothing came out, because there was no defense. There was no excuse, and we both knew it. Mother, he finally whispered, please, just this once. I'm begging you. Give me the money. Seeing my son beg should have softened me. I should have felt pity, but I felt nothing. Because his pleas weren't out of love. They were out of desperation, out of greed, out of fear of losing what was never his. No, I said with finality. And now I need you to leave. I have things to do. He looked at me in disbelief. You're kicking me out. I am asking you to respect my decision and leave, I replied. Daniel took a step toward me. His face changed again. The desperation turned into something darker. A threat. You know what, Mother? Maybe you're right. Maybe you're not my responsibility anymore. So when you're old, when you're sick, when you need help, don't come looking for me. Because I won't be there for you either. His words were meant to hurt me, meant to make me afraid. But they only confirmed what I already knew. That he had never been there for me. And he never would be. I can live with that, I said calmly. But wait, I said as he was about to leave. There is something else you need to know. A second piece of news. Daniel stopped. He turned around slowly. What else could there be? He asked, weary. I took out my phone. I swiped the screen until I found what I was looking for. And I showed it to him. He squinted trying to see. It was a document. A legal document? What is that? He asked, moving closer. It's my will, I replied. I updated it last week. Daniel grabbed the phone from my hands and started to read. I watched his face change. Watched the confusion turn to shock. Watched the shock turn to horror. This can't be real, he muttered. It's completely real, I confirmed. Signed before a notary. Completely legal. The will specified that the new home I bought, plus all the money I had left, would be donated to a charity for abandoned seniors when I died. Daniel would receive nothing. Absolutely nothing. You're disinheriting me, he said, his voice trembling. I'm teaching you a lesson, I replied. The lesson that family isn't about waiting for inheritances. It's about love, about respect, about being present. And you did none of that. He started to shake. His whole body was shaking. His hands, his legs, even his voice trembled when he spoke. But Mother, Melissa, and I can't be homeless. You have jobs. You have savings. You have incomes, I said. Of course we do. You have all of that. You just don't have my money. And that is your real desperation. Daniel dropped the phone. He put his hands to his head. And for the first time in this whole situation, I saw him truly broken. It wasn't an act. It wasn't manipulation. It was the genuine collapse of someone who has just lost everything he expected to get without effort. How could you do this to me? He whispered. How could I? I repeated. Daniel, I didn't do anything to you. You did this to yourself. You spent years treating me like an ATM, like something that was only useful when you needed money. You never asked how I was. You were never interested in my life. You never saw me as a person, only as a resource. And now that the resource has dried up, you fall apart. Because you never learned to stand on your own 2 feet. Because you always expected me to solve your life for you. He slid to the floor, sitting with his back against the wall, just as I had been minutes ago. But our postures meant opposite things. I had been in a position of power. He was in a position of defeat. You're going to regret this, he said, not looking at me. Someday you'll be alone, sick, scared, and you'll regret this. Maybe, I replied. Or maybe I'll find peace knowing I lived my last years with dignity, that I didn't let myself be used, that I reclaimed my worth. He let out a bitter laugh. Your worth. What worth do you have if nobody loves you? If your only son hates you? I'd rather you hate me for defending myself, I said, than love me only for what you can get from me. Daniel stood up slowly. He looked at me one last time, and in his eyes, I saw something I had never seen before. Total surrender. I hope you're happy with your decision, he said, dragging his words. I hope that money keeps you warm at night when you're completely alone. I was already alone, Daniel. You were just taking up space. He walked out without closing the door. I heard him descend the stairs. I heard the car start, and I heard it drive away. The silence that remained was absolute. I sat on the floor again. My legs wouldn't support me. My whole body was shaking from released tension. But I didn't cry. I didn't feel sadness. I felt something strange, something I hadn't felt in years. I felt complete, as if a part of me that had been dormant had finally awakened. As if I had recovered something I thought I'd lost forever. My dignity. I stayed in that empty home for almost an hour, sitting on the floor, staring at bare walls, processing everything that had just happened. I had no regrets. Not for a single second did I doubt my decision. But there was something in the air, a feeling of finality, of closure. This place had been my home for 30 years. I had cooked thousands of meals here. I had mourned Arthur's death here. I had grown old in loneliness here. And now here I had reclaimed my freedom. I stood up slowly. I walked through each empty room. I touched the walls with my fingertips. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for everything. And I walked out, closing the door behind me for the last time. When I got to my new home, the contrast was absolute. The windows let in natural light. The space was small but cozy. Everything smelled new, of possibilities, of beginnings. I made myself some tea. I sat by the window, and for the first time in a long time, I smiled genuinely. Not a forced smile, not a polite smile, but a smile of real satisfaction. I had done something for myself. I had chosen my well-being over the manipulation of others, and that felt powerful. The phone rang, interrupting my moment of peace. It was an unknown number. I hesitated before answering, but I finally did. Hello. On the other end was a female voice I didn't recognize. Mrs. Patterson, this is Lauren. Melissa's sister. I need to talk to you. My stomach tightened. Lauren. Melissa had told her sister everything. And now came round two. The attempt to make me feel guilty through someone else. Go ahead, I replied in a neutral voice. Mrs. Patterson, Melissa told me what happened, and I want you to know that I am very disappointed in you. How could you do that to your own son? He needed you, and you turned your back on him. I took a deep breath. Lauren, with all due respect, you don't know the whole story. You only know the version your sister told you, the version where I'm the villain. But there's much more to it. She snorted. What more could there be? You sold the home your son needed. That's all I need to know. Your son didn't need that home, I replied firmly. Your son wanted that home. There's a huge difference. Lauren kept talking. Her voice was harsh, accusatory. Melissa is devastated. Daniel was devastated. You destroyed their dreams, their future plans. And for what? To purchase yourself a smaller home and hoard money you won't even live to spend. That is pure selfishness. I listened to her words without interrupting. I let her say everything she had to say. And when she finally fell silent, waiting for my response, I spoke with a calm that surprised even me. Lauren, I understand you want to defend your sister. It's natural. But let me ask you something. When was the last time Daniel and Melissa visited me without asking for something? When was the last time they called just to see how I was? When was the last time they treated me like a person and not like a bank? There was an uncomfortable silence on the other end. They have their lives, Lauren finally said with less conviction. Their jobs, their responsibilities. Exactly, I replied. They have their lives and I have mine. And my life does not consist of sacrificing myself eternally so they can live comfortably. Lauren tried to argue more. But Mrs. Patterson, you're the mother. Parents should always help their children. They should always be there. I was there for 38 years, I said, raising my voice slightly. I gave my son everything I could. But there comes a time when children must stand on their own. And if at 38, Daniel is still expecting me to solve his life, then I failed as a mother. But I am not going to continue failing by allowing him to use me. Lauren disconnected without saying goodbye. And I stared at the phone. I knew it wouldn't be the last call. That Melissa and Daniel would try to use other people to pressure me, to make me feel guilty, to break me. But I had already made my decision. And nobody was going to make me change my mind. That night, before sleeping, I checked my bank account online. There was the money, over $125,000. It was more money than I had ever had at one time in my entire life. And it was all mine. Nobody could take it from me. Nobody could demand it. It was my safety net. My freedom materialized in numbers on a screen. I slept peacefully that night. No nightmares, no anxiety. Just peace. The following days were strangely normal. I focused on setting up my new home. I bought plants for the windows. I hung light cream curtains. One organized my books on the small bookshelf. Everything I did reminded me that this space was mine, that nobody held a key, that nobody had entered that space before me. It was my sanctuary, my fresh start. A week later, I received a text message from Daniel. It was long, full of carefully chosen words. Mother, it began. I've had time to think, and I think we both said hurtful things. I know I failed you as a son. I know I haven't been present as I should have. But that doesn't mean I don't love you. You're my mother, and you always will be. I'd like to talk so we can fix this. I read the message 3 times, searching for sincerity between the lines. But I didn't find it, because at no point did it say, I'm sorry. At no point did it acknowledge the real damage he had done. It was just a generic apology. One more attempt to get closer to see if you could get something. I didn't reply. I simply put the phone away and went on with my day. 2 days later, another message arrived. This one was from Melissa. Mrs. Patterson, please don't close the door on us. I know we made mistakes, but everyone deserves a second chance. Daniel is in a very bad way. He's barely eating, barely sleeping. He keeps thinking about how to fix things with you. Please give him that chance. I didn't reply to that one either, because I knew it was theater. Emotional manipulation. A last-ditch attempt to soften me. One afternoon, while I was sitting in a park near my new home, I saw an older woman sitting on a bench. She was alone, feeding pigeons with breadcrumbs. I walked over and sat next to her. It's a beautiful day, I said. She smiled. Beautiful, she confirmed. I come here every day. It's my moment of peace. I asked her if she had family. She nodded. 4 children, 7 grandchildren, but I barely see them. They're busy with their lives, and I understand. I don't want to be a burden. Her words reminded me of myself months ago. You are not a burden, I told her. You are a person, and you deserve to be treated as one. She looked at me, surprised, and then she smiled with tears in her eyes. Thank you. I needed to hear that. We talked for almost an hour. She told me her life story, her struggles, her disappointments, and I told her mine. I told her about Daniel, about Melissa, about the home, about my decision. And she listened without judgment. When I finished, she took my hand. You did the right thing, she said firmly. I wish I'd had your courage. But I'm afraid of being left completely alone. Being alone is not the worst thing that can happen, I told her. The worst thing is being surrounded by people who make you feel alone. She nodded slowly, as if those words had touched something deep inside her. We said goodbye with an embrace, and as I walked back home, I felt something new: connection, empathy, purpose. I had spent so much time focused on my broken relationship with Daniel that I had forgotten there were other people in the world, other stories, other solitudes I could accompany. That night, I made a decision. I would look for activity groups for seniors, classes, workshops, whatever. I needed to build a new life. A life that didn't revolve around my son. I went online and started searching. I found a watercolor workshop given on Wednesday and Friday afternoons. I had never painted in my life, but something in the description caught my eye. Expression without judgment, creativity without pressure, community without commitment. I signed up before I could change my mind. The first workshop was in 4 days, and although I was nervous, I also felt excited. An excitement I hadn't felt in years. The excitement of starting something new, of discovering a part of myself I had never explored. Meanwhile, the messages from Daniel and Melissa continued to arrive, more desperate each time, more manipulative. Mother, please. You can't ignore us forever. We're your family. Mrs. Patterson, Daniel is considering therapy. He really wants to change. He just needs your support. Mother, at least answer so we know you're okay. We're worried. Every message was an attempt to reopen the door I had closed. But I was no longer the same woman who could be convinced with pretty words. I was someone new. Someone stronger. Someone who had finally learned that saying no doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a person with boundaries. And boundaries are not walls, they are doors. Doors that you decide when to open and when to keep closed. On Sunday, I received one last call. This time it was from a number I recognized. It was Vera, a distant cousin I hadn't seen in years. "Ruth," she said in a serious voice. "Daniel called me. He told me what happened. And I want to tell you that I understand your position, but I also want to ask you to consider forgiveness. Family is the most important thing, and grudges only hurt you." I listened to her words. I took a deep breath, and I replied, "Vera, it's not a grudge. It's a decision. The decision not to allow them to keep hurting me. And if family is so important, why didn't Daniel show it when he could? Why does he only remember family when he needs something?" She didn't know what to say, and I took advantage of the silence. "I appreciate your call, Vera, but this decision is already made." And I disconnected. Wednesday came faster than I expected. It was the day of my first painting class. I woke up early. I had a calm breakfast. I got dressed in comfortable clothes, gray pants, a soft ivory-colored blouse. Nothing special, but I felt good. When I arrived at the place, it was a small, light-filled room. There were 7 other people, all women, all over 50. The teacher's name was Dorothy. She had white hair pulled back in a messy bun and a warm smile that made you feel immediately welcome. "Good morning," she said in a soft voice. "Today we're not going to worry about making something perfect. We're just going to let our hands express what we feel." And so my new life began. At first I felt clumsy. The brush trembled in my hand. The colors mixed in strange ways on the canvas. But Dorothy walked between the tables, saying beautiful things. There are no mistakes in art, only discoveries. After an hour, something inside me relaxed. I stopped thinking. I stopped judging every stroke. And I just painted. I don't know what I was creating. It was abstract, chaotic, but it was mine. And when the class ended, I felt lighter, as if I had released something I had been holding in for years. The other women also shared their work. Each one had a story. Each one had her battles. And nobody judged anyone. It was a safe space. A space where I could just be Ruth, not someone's mother, not someone's widow, just me. After class, one of the women approached me. Her name was Beatrice. She had short, curly hair and a contagious laugh. "It's your first time, isn't it?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. "You can tell, but in a good way. It looks like you have a lot to get out." We laughed together. She invited me to get coffee. We went to a nearby coffee shop. And as we drank our hot cups, Beatrice told me her story. She had been married for 42 years. Her husband died 4 years ago, and her children lived in other cities. They visited once yearly if she was lucky. "At first, I got really depressed," she told me. "I felt like my life was over. But one day, I decided that if nobody was going to live my life for me, then I would have to do it. And here I am, painting, dancing, living." Her words resonated deeply with me. It was exactly what I was doing. Reclaiming my life. Beatrice became my first real friend in years. We started getting together after every class. Sometimes we would walk in the park, and we always talked about everything, about nothing. No filters, no judgments. It was liberating to have someone who understood what it meant to reinvent yourself at this age. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks of peace, of new routines, of days filled with small joys. But of course, the peace couldn't last forever. One Thursday afternoon, someone knocked on the door of my home. I wasn't expecting visitors. I looked through the peephole and my heart stopped for a second. It was Melissa. I opened the door just a crack. "What are you doing here?" I asked, not inviting her in. Melissa looked different, thinner, more tired. She had deep, dark circles under her eyes. "Mrs. Patterson, please. I just want to talk. 5 minutes, that's all." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face, but another part was curious. What could she want now? I opened the door fully, but stayed in the doorway. "Talk," I said, crossing my arms. Melissa took a deep breath. "I came to apologize. For real. Daniel doesn't know I'm here. He's angry. He says he'll never forgive you. But I can't live like this. I can't live with this tension, with this grudge. I need you to know that I'm sorry, that I understand why you did what you did." Her speech was prepared, rehearsed. "You're sorry," I repeated. "Or you're sorry you lost access to the money." Melissa looked down. "I know you think we only cared about the money. And maybe at first we did. But we weren't bad people, Mrs. Patterson. We were just desperate, scared of the future. And we saw your home as the solution to all our problems. But that didn't give us the right to treat you the way we did." At least she was admitting something. That was more than Daniel had done. "I appreciate your apology, Melissa, but it doesn't change anything." She looked up quickly. "But we could start over. We could build a real relationship, without interests, without pressure, just as family." I sighed. "I wish I could believe you, but building trust again takes time. And honestly, I don't know if I have that time or that energy." Melissa nodded slowly. Tears began to roll down her cheeks. "I understand. I just wanted you to know that not all of us are like Daniel. That I am sorry. And that if you ever decide to give us another chance, I'll be here." She turned to leave, but before she went down the stairs, I turned to her. "Melissa." She stopped. "If you really want to show me you've changed, don't do it with words. Do it with actions. And not toward me. Do it for yourself. Build your life without depending on inheritances, without expecting others to solve your problems. That's the only way I could ever see you as someone truly different." She nodded, and she left. I don't know if she would really change. Probably not. But at least she had tried something Daniel never did. Acknowledge her mistake. That night, alone in my home, I thought a lot about forgiveness. About whether it was weak to forgive someone who had hurt you so much, or if it was strong. And I came to a conclusion. Forgiveness was not for Daniel. Forgiveness was for me. To release the weight I had been carrying. To be able to move forward without resentment poisoning my soul. That forgiving did not mean forgetting. It did not mean allowing him to hurt me again. It meant letting go and moving on. The following days continued peacefully. The painting classes became my favorite time of the week. Dorothy taught us different techniques: watercolor, oil, acrylic. And each time I felt freer, more myself. One afternoon while I was painting, Dorothy came over to my table. "Ruth," she said softly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Have you noticed how your painting has changed since you started?" I looked at her confused. "How so?" "At first you painted with small strokes, fearful, controlled, but now your strokes are broad, confident, free. That speaks to an internal change. A liberation." I felt a lump in my throat, because she was right. I had changed, and that change was reflected even in things I hadn't noticed. "I went through something difficult recently," I told her. "I had to make decisions that hurt, but they were necessary." Dorothy smiled. "The best decisions always hurt at first, but then they give you wings." Those words stayed with me. They give you wings? Yes, that was exactly how I felt. as if after years of being tied down, I could finally fly. Beatrice and I started planning a short trip, just a weekend, to a nearby city, to see museums, to walk without a destination, to enjoy life without asking permission. It was something small, but it meant everything. It meant I could make plans, that my life was not over, that there were still adventures to be lived. When I told Beatrice about my situation with Daniel, she didn't judge me. She just embraced me and said, "Children don't understand that parents have a right to live too. They think we were born just to serve them, but you taught them something important. You taught them boundaries." 3 months had passed since the confrontation. 3 months of tranquility, of new routines, of painting, of friendship with Beatrice, of afternoons in the park, of nights reading on my small but comfortable couch. My life had found a rhythm that made me happy. It wasn't an explosive happiness. It was a quiet happiness, deep, real, but as it often happens, just when you get used to the peace, the past comes knocking on your door again. It was a Saturday morning. I was making coffee when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting visitors. I looked through the peephole, and this time it wasn't Melissa. It was Daniel, alone without his wife. He looked different, thinner with an unkempt beard, with dark circles that spoke of sleepless nights. I hesitated before opening, but something in his posture made me do it. I opened the door, but stayed in the doorway, blocking the entrance. "What do you want, Daniel?" He held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I just want to talk. No yelling, no demands. Just talk, please." There was something in his voice that sounded different, more broken, more real. I let him in. We sat in the small living room. He looked around with a strange expression. "This is your new place?" he asked. "Yes, it's nice. Small, but enough for me." He nodded silently. There was a long, awkward silence. And then he spoke. "Mother, I came to tell you that you were right. About everything." I raised an eyebrow, surprised. Daniel never admitted his mistakes. "Go on," I said. He ran his hands over his face. "The last 3 months have been the worst of my life. Melissa and I almost separated. We lost the house we wanted. I had problems at work from being so distracted, and all because I couldn't accept that I had lost something that was never mine." I stayed quiet, letting him talk. "I went to therapy," he continued. "The therapist made me see things I didn't want to accept. He made me see that I had treated you like a resource, like something I could use when I needed it. I never saw you as a person with your own needs, with a right to your own life, and that's unforgivable." I felt something move in my chest. It wasn't relief, not yet, but it was something. "I'm glad you're going to therapy," I said carefully. "That's a good step." Daniel looked up. There were tears in his eyes. "I didn't come to ask you for money. I didn't come to ask you to change your will. I came just to tell you that I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry, and that I understand if you can never forgive me." His words sounded sincere. For the first time in years, they sounded genuine. But I had learned to be cautious. "I appreciate your apology, Daniel. But apologies don't erase years of mistreatment. They don't erase the pain you caused me." He nodded. "I know, and I don't expect them to. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what I did, and that I'm trying to be better. Not for you, not even for Melissa, but for myself, because I don't like the person I have become." We sat in silence for a few more minutes, and then I asked him something I had wanted to know for a long time. "Daniel, why did you never visit me? Why did it always seem like an obligation to spend time with me?" He took a deep breath. "Because you reminded me of Dad, and his death hurt me so much that I preferred to stay away from everything that reminded me of him, including you. I know it sounds horrible. I know it's selfish, but it's the truth. His words hit me hard because I finally had an answer. It wasn't a good answer, but at least it was honest. I miss Arthur too, I said softly. Every day. But pushing me away didn't make the pain any less. It just made me feel more alone. He nodded, tears rolling down his face. I wish I could go back in time, he said in a broken voice. Do things differently, but I can't. The only thing I can do is try to be better from here on out. If you ever decide to give me another chance, I promise it will be different. But if not, I understand that too. I looked at my son crying in front of me, and I felt something complex. It wasn't total forgiveness. Not yet, but it wasn't hatred either. It was something in between. It was an acknowledgement of his humanity, his flaws, his capacity for change. I need time, I told him finally. A lot of time. I can't just forget everything and trust you again. But I appreciate that you came, that you were honest. That's more than I expected. He got up to leave. Before opening the door, he turned. Can I call you? Every once in a while, just to see how you are. Without asking for anything, I thought for a moment. You can. But if you ever try to manipulate me again, if you ever treat me like you did before, there will be no more chances. He nodded. I understand. And he left. When I closed the door, I stood there for a long time, processing, feeling. I didn't know if Daniel would really change. If this time was different, but at least he had taken the first step. He had acknowledged his mistake. And that was more than Melissa had done. More than anyone had done. That afternoon, I went to my painting class. Dorothy noticed something different in me. Did something happen? She asked. Yes, I replied. My son came to apologize, and I don't know how to feel about it. She smiled with understanding. You don't have to know how to feel. Feelings are complex. They can coexist. You can be hurt and hopeful at the same time. I painted that day with a different intensity. I used dark colors mixed with bright ones, representing exactly what I felt. The darkness of the past mixed with the light of a possible future. When I finished, Beatrice came over to see my work. It's beautiful, she said, and sad and hopeful, all at the same time. Exactly, I replied. That's how I feel. That night, alone in my home, I felt a lot about forgiveness. About whether it was weak to forgive someone who had hurt you so much, or if it was strong. And I came to a conclusion. Forgiveness was not for Daniel. Forgiveness was for me, to release the weight I had been carrying, to be able to move forward without resentment poisoning my soul. But forgiving did not mean forgetting. It did not mean allowing him to hurt me again. It meant letting go and moving on. The following days were lighter, as if something heavy had been lifted from my shoulders. Daniel called me twice that week. Short conversations, simple, asking how I was, briefly telling me about his day, not asking for anything, not manipulating. And although I still kept my guard up, I began to feel that maybe, just maybe, there was hope. Beatrice and I finally took our trip. We went to a coastal city. We walked on the beach. We visited art galleries. We ate seafood in little restaurants. And I laughed. I really laughed. With my whole body. With my whole soul. I laughed in a way I hadn't laughed in years. And in one of those moments, walking along the shore with my feet in the cold water, Beatrice told me something I will never forget. Ruth, she said, taking my hand, I'm proud of you, of how you stood up for yourself, of how you took your life back. You're braver than you think. Her words filled me with an emotion that was hard to describe, because for so long I have felt weak, cowardly, invisible, but now someone saw me as brave. And maybe she was right. Maybe I had been brave all this time without realizing it. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting in spite of it. And I had done exactly that. That night, lying in the hotel room, staring at the ceiling, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt gratitude. Gratitude for my life, for my decisions, for my freedom, for everything I had lived through and survived. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what happened with Daniel, whether our relationship was repaired or not, I would be okay, because I finally had myself. 6 months had passed since that day of the confrontation. Half a year of learning to live again, of discovering who I was without the chains of guilt, without the weight of others' expectations. It was a Sunday morning. The sun came through my window, illuminating the plants that now filled every corner of my small home. I got up without rushing. I made my coffee, and I sat by the window as I did every morning. But this time there was something different in the air, a feeling of fullness, of complete closure. My phone vibrated. It was a message from Beatrice. Ready for the exhibition today? I smiled. Today was a special day. Dorothy had organized a small exhibition of her students' work, and I had decided to participate. I dressed with care, an olive green dress I had bought the week before. I did my hair. I put on light makeup, and I looked in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was different from the one 6 months ago. There was something in her eyes, strength, peace, recovered dignity. I arrived at the art studio an hour early. My 3 paintings were already hanging on the wall. The first was dark, full of grays and blacks. It represented my life before. The second was chaotic, bright colors mixed with shadows. It represented the conflict, the awakening. And the third was luminous, full of yellows and oranges. It represented my present, my freedom. Dorothy came over with a huge smile. Ruth, your works tell a complete story. It's beautiful to see your evolution. People started to arrive. Other students, family, friends. Beatrice arrived with a bouquet of flowers for me. I'm so proud of you, she said, embracing me tight. We walked among the artworks. Each one told a different story. Each woman had put her battles onto those canvases. And there was something powerful in that. And seeing how pain could be transformed into beauty. And seeing how creativity healed us. I was explaining the meaning of my second painting to a woman when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Mother. I turned around slowly. Daniel was standing in the doorway, alone, with a small bouquet of wildflowers in his hands. He looked nervous, insecure, as if he didn't know if he was welcome. I walked toward him with measured steps. What are you doing here? I asked without hostility, but with caution. You told me you had this exhibition, he replied, and I wanted to come. I wanted to see what you've been doing. If you'll let me. I looked into his eyes, searching for ulterior motives, but I only saw genuine curiosity. It's fine. You can stay. His face lit up with relief. We walked together to my paintings. He observed them in silence for a long time, and then he spoke in a soft voice. This first one is how you felt before, isn't it? I nodded. And this third one is how you feel now? I nodded again. He pointed to the middle one, the chaotic one. And this is me. I'm the chaos that interrupted your darkness, but also the one that pushed you toward the light. His words surprised me with their depth. I hadn't thought of it that way, I admitted. But you're right. Daniel turned to me. Mother, I've thought a lot these past few months. I've worked on myself, and I realized something. You didn't take anything from me. You gave me something I never had. You gave me an example of what it means to stand up for yourself, of what it means to live with dignity. And even though it hurt at the time, now I understand. I felt a lump in my throat. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, he replied. I just wanted you to know. And I wanted to give you this. He handed me the flowers. They're not much, but I picked them out myself, without Melissa's help, without consulting anyone, just thinking of you. I took the flowers with trembling hands. They were simple but beautiful. Thank you, I whispered. Daniel stayed at the exhibition for 2 hours. He talked with Beatrice, with Dorothy, with other students. And for the first time, I saw him genuinely interested in my life, in what I had built. Before he left, he embraced me. It was a different embrace, not the mechanical embrace from before. It was a real embrace, with feeling. I'm proud of you, Mother, and I'm sorry it took me so long to tell you. When he left, Beatrice came over. That's your son? I nodded. He's changing. Or at least he's trying. She smiled. Sometimes people need to lose something to value it. Maybe your courage taught him something important. Maybe, I replied. Only time will tell. But it's not my responsibility to fix him anymore. That's his own battle. And I have mine. My battle is to keep growing, to keep living. The exhibition ended at sunset. Dorothy gathered us all and gave a short speech. Each of you came here with your wounds, with your stories, with your fears. But look at what you created. Beauty from pain, strength from vulnerability, and community from loneliness. I am honored to have been part of your journeys. We all applauded with tears in our eyes. That night, back in my home, I put Daniel's flowers in a vase. I placed them by the window where the morning sun would light them up, and I sat and thought about the entire journey. I had sold my home. I had confronted my son. I had set boundaries. I had started painting. I had made a friend. I had reclaimed my dignity. And although there were still moments of doubt, of sadness, of wondering if I had done the right thing, deep down I knew the answer. I had done exactly what I needed to do. I had saved myself because nobody else was going to. The following months continued at their quiet pace. Daniel called me once weekly. Simple conversations. No demands. No manipulations. Just genuine questions about my life. And I shared. I told him about my paintings, about Beatrice, about the books I was reading, and he listened. He really listened. I don't know if our relationship would ever be like it was before, but honestly, I didn't want it to be. I wanted something new, something healthier, something built on mutual respect and not on obligation. A year after the confrontation, I was sitting in the same park where I had met that woman feeding pigeons, and I saw her again, sitting on the same bench. I approached with a smile. Do you remember me? She looked up and her eyes lit up. The brave woman. Of course I remember you. We sat together. I told her everything that had happened. She listened attentively, and when I finished, she took my hand. You did more than save yourself. You saved me too. After our conversation, I took your advice. I set boundaries with my children. And you know what? Some got angry, but others understood. And now I have a more honest relationship with them. Thank you. Her words filled me with a deep emotion because I had made a difference. Not just in my life, but in someone else's. That night before sleeping, I wrote in a journal I had started to keep. Today marks 1 year since I made the hardest decision of my life. 1 year since I chose my dignity over the approval of others. And I can say with total honesty that I do not regret it. I learned that love is not constant sacrifice, That family is not blind obligation. That forgiveness is not forgetting. And that old age is not the end. It is just another stage. A stage where I can finally be who I was always meant to be. I belong to no one now. I am just myself. And that is more than enough. It is everything. I closed the journal. I turned off the light. And I fell asleep with a smile. The smile of a free woman. If this story touched something deep inside you, don't keep it silent. Tell me where you're listening from in the comments. Share your own experience if you've ever had to stand up for yourself like this. Maybe your voice, your story, is exactly what another person needs to hear to find their own courage. If you want to follow along with more stories like this one stories about finding strength, when life pushes you to your limits, please subscribe. Hit that like button. Share this with someone who might need to hear it today. Let's keep walking this path together, because nobody should ever be made to feel useless in their own home. Nobody should ever shrink themselves down to fit into someone else's comfort. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. God bless you, wherever you are.